So at any point in time, if you want to stop me or whatever, just let me know. I'll edit out those portions. All right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we can just show I can show the thumbs up.
Sure.
If you want to stop.
क्या program है यार तेरा?
No. If you want to stop,
put your hand up.
Reaction.
Don't want to wave.
Wow. That's a lot of things that I have to watch for. But okay, take it.
Thumbs up, yeah.
Yeah.
Prasad, did you try thumbs up? Taste the thunder.
Then I'll clap for you all.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, guys. All right.
Hey, yaar. Let's go.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there. My guests today are Nidhi Pant, Prasad Baji, Pankaj Chopra, and Sandeep Kadodia, who goes by Sandy, all members of the COVID committee of a large condo in South Mumbai. A note to our listeners, managing committee members of a housing society or resident welfare association are elected representatives under the Societies Registration Act and carry statutory responsibilities. Nidhi is a chartered accountant and worked with the Tata Group for several years before taking up even more challenging responsibilities as a stay-at-home mom and committee member. Prasad is an engineer from IIT Bombay and a management graduate from IIM Calcutta with over 22 years of experience in the corporate world, primarily in finance, having worked at Edelweiss, ICICI, JSW, and Siemens. In 2018, he transitioned to the social sector as an advisor to social purpose organizations. Pankaj is a finance leader turned entrepreneur running a SEBI-registered PMS for HNI clients. With more than 3 decades of work experience, he has worked with corporate groups such as HDFC and Reliance as a fund manager. He is a self-confessed fitness enthusiast, plays squash, and is a regular at the Ironman and other marathons. And my last guest for the day is Sandy, who comes from a business family and ran a power loom factory before joining Spenta International, in charge of finance, compliance, administration, and accounts for 20 years. He is currently retired and, in his words, enjoying life. Once again, welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, good to be here.
Thank you, Manisha.
All right. Okay, pleasure to have you guys here. Now, 2020 has truly been a bizarre year, and the Cooperative Housing Society, or RWA, has suddenly found itself front and center in managing lockdown guidelines and keeping neighbors safe and healthy. Pankaj, as a committee member, there's no positional authority over other members of the society. How did you socialize the guidelines given this fact, and are there any instances that were particularly challenging?
So, Manisha, that's a very interesting and a very intriguing question. How do you ensure compliance with authority? And I think the short answer to this is that if you can't pull your rank, you need to earn the respect. And there are 4 or 5 factors which are deeply entwined, which really come into play in this whole earn the respect scenario. The first of them is alignment of interest. So you have to make sure as a committee that the interest of all members of the society are aligned properly. So it should not happen. And this is actually one of the biggest pitfalls, that if the interests of the committee members or specific members in the committee are not completely aligned with the entire society, residents and members, that is one of the reasons why some of the societies face challenges while implementing decisions that they take. Second is transparency and effective communication. So while you can communicate your decisions to people, it is fair to let them know how you came and arrived at these decisions, what debates did you have, what factors did you consider. So these are important things that one needs to put out to the general public there to be able to get their buy-in to the decisions that you are taking. So to give you some of these personal anecdotes in terms of alignment of interest. So along with squash, I also play tennis. And there's been a lot of talk about tennis being a non-contact sport, being played outside and not in a closed-door environment, and that whether it should be allowed in this present situation or not. So while I play tennis myself, I don't think that it is in the larger interest of the community because there's still some contact. You might use the same balls and things like that. And how do you control people? So you might put in rules saying that only two people at a time, but how do you control, monitor, and things like that? So, and then again, this whole thing about if you open one sport, why not the other? So while my personal interest might be there to sort of open up tennis as soon as possible, but because it's not in the interest of the community, I've actually been fighting against my friends and fellow players to say that this is not the right time to open up the sport. The third factor that I wanted to bring into play is demonstration of sincerity, with which I mean that you need to have a rule-based system. So you can't have ad hoc decisions that come in or ad hoc situations and your reactions to them. So if you've put in processes and rules and you follow them for everybody, including yourself and for other committee members, then I think people understand. So while some particular rule or a situation or a circumstance might not agree with a particular individual, but because it's rule based, they understand that and they will do. So somebody gains at some point in time, somebody else gains at another. Another one is you have to lead by example. So again, I'll give you a small personal anecdote. So I work in the wealth management stroke portfolio management business. It's an essential service, just like banking. It's a financial service. But it's been more than 2 months now. And while I could have gone to office saying I'm in essential services, I haven't stepped out except for once. And I will explain to you why once I went out of the building. So one is managed as much as possible. People watch you very closely if you're in the committee or in a position of power. So are you also adhering to the rules? Are you doing the right things at the right time? Becomes really, very important. So you tell somebody else to do something and you yourself have a different set of rules for yourselves. If you go to the gate and if you pass around, maybe you can't pull your rank with other committee members, but you probably can pull your rank on the security staff that is standing at the gate. And so you shut around at them and you take an exit. You can do that, but people will be watching you. And the next time you come with some decision, they might not really follow that very closely. And the last, I think, is a show of commitment. And so in a company, you have a chain of command. You have seniors that you can go to if there is a problem. In a housing society, everybody is a CEO. Everybody has an equal rank. But also similarly, when somebody has a problem, unless they can go or reach out to friends, but something which is more legal or something which they don't know where to go, one of the places they want to reach out to is the managing committee, saying that maybe somebody from the management committee can help them or guide them as to what to do in these situations. And that is the time that you really have to commit. It might not be the best thing for you to do at that point in time. You might need to spend a lot of time and energy, but you need to do that to earn the respect of that individual as well as the society as a whole, so that people look up to you and you earn that respect. And in that, the personal anecdote which I wanted to connect to is the only reason I've gone out of the building in the last 2 months is to take a fellow resident out to the hospital. Me and Sandy went together to a hospital. He had needed to be admitted to the ICU at that point in time. COVID was very much prevalent and we were all scared. And there was a complete lockdown at that point in time, not the easing up that's happened recently. And the hospital itself had a COVID wing. So the family, his family was worried, my family was worried, but it needed to be done at that point in time. So I think these factors are important. You need to demonstrate this. It's not an event; it's a process. Over a period of time, people understand that you are looking after their best interests. And so when rules come in, we do not agree with them completely and personally. They still will respect them because they know that it's in the large interest of the society.
Well said. I've also made a mental note to ask you, how do you play squash and tennis at the same time? But I will come back to that later. So,
No, sure, anytime. We can have a longer discussion.
okay, so Prasad, with so many different guidelines, WhatsApp forwards, and conflicting information, how do you ensure that you're getting accurate information? I mean, who are you guys talking to, right? Experts, epidemiologists, other RWAs, authorities, and what does decision making in this group actually comprise of?
Right. So firstly, thanks for doing this session on the Planet Coalition Code Committee. Appreciate it, and thanks for having me on the same. Clearly, information is a vital resource, considering that this is a completely new phenomenon, and it's also vital because it is an input for decision making and action going forward. So any wrong information can obviously have serious consequences. So when we have looked at information, I think we have first of all a little bit of a hierarchy. So I think clearly at the lowest level, which we generally tend to not look at credibility, not see as very credible, are the WhatsApp forwards or general social media forwards. But we do tend to look at certain sources, such as the Twitter handles of statutory authorities, BMC, Ministry of Health, PIB. PIB releases has press releases which are authentic. Obviously, the various state governments, the various central government as such, really have their guidelines which they release, which we look at thoroughly and carefully. So obviously, we look at therefore sources. At the very source, we look at the information. That's one. Yes, and as you mentioned, we do talk to multiple stakeholders. We look at what other housing societies, what other RWAs are doing. We talk to doctors. So we talk to multiple stakeholders and see what are the various points of views and various information, soft and hard, that we can get from them before arriving at information. So that's one. So, for example, on the information front, I'll just put down an anecdote here. One of the residents got stuck in outside of PG during the lockdown, and unfortunately, that place became a containment zone. At a point in time, it was lifted and it ceased to be a containment zone. And the resident made a submission that she be allowed to return. When we checked for this place in containment zone on the BMC website, we saw that it was still a containment zone. So we are a little confused. And so I decided that let us check as to what is the reality. I spoke to the secretary of that building, and he mentioned that it has been lifted from the containment zone, but BMC website takes 2 to 3 days to update. I then decided to speak to even BMC, and we spoke to BMC, and they also mentioned that yes, it is removed as a containment zone. It will be updated shortly. I think that gives us a lot of confidence. But we also got additional input from both these sources as to how should we as Planet Godrej look at somebody who's residing there. And based on that, based on this information, and based on the inputs that we got from these sources, we took, I would say, the appropriate decision. And even the resident was, I think, cooperative in that sense. So it was a situation where I think we were able to handle well. Coming to the decision making, we at Planet Godrej have 5 different societies corresponding to the 5 different towers. So there are 5 different legal entities with their own MCs. Here, what we have done is we have come together and we have decided that instead of having individual tower-wise rules, we'll have single rules for Planet Godrej as a whole. And it's not that anybody can follow their own, can follow their own rules. So therefore, the committee is discussing everything together, implementing all the measures together, and taking all of decisions, approvals, etc. together. Within that, it's a majority decision typically of at least 3 towers for the 5 states. But even within that, I think it's not as if that one will always get bulldozed if one is in minority. I'll recite a specific incident. There was a case where somebody, there was a resident who was outside and she was returning, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember the situation correctly. And Sandy, obviously, on behalf of the resident, who was a tower, his tower resident, put up the request, and 3 towers agreed to it. But one of the towers said that they feel that there should be some quarantining or some such thing for, or there should be some social distancing, etc. So there was a suggestion one of the towers. So even though Sandy was well within his right to not take that input, he advised it to the resident, and the resident also accepted it, and it kind of became a better decision, a better action as a result of that input. So I would say, while on paper the decision making is minority, I think we still look at inputs based on the quality of the inputs rather than simply whether 3 towers have given the inputs, etc. So these are the things, and I would say some of the parameters that we look in the decision making, considering the nature of COVID, is what is the risk of infection. So we have tried to reduce many-to-many interactions. Obviously, the standard measures of social distancing, hygiene, etc., those have been taken. For example, on e-commerce deliveries, initially we actually stopped even e-commerce deliveries because of apprehension on the parcels, etc., spreading infection. But later on, as we realized that when we look at the risk versus advantage, or risk versus benefit equation, then we restarted the e-commerce deliveries. I think that has also gone up better. So these are some of the parameters that we have looked at in the decision.
Seems pretty comprehensive, and surely you would have had some sort of powwow, right? It seems as of now that everything's gone like placid water, but I don't hear any disagreements.
So at the committee level, there are definitely very strong debates, and there have been situations where the disagreement has become rather difficult to handle. But I think in the end, we accept that it is not that people are wanting to debate and disagree just for the sake of being difficult, but because this is a situation which requires multiple views, multiple inputs, and therefore in the end, it is the quality of that inputs and what the logic that is there is important, rather than whether there is a personal issue between the various committee members. So fights do happen. I am not at all denying that. But in the end, I think somehow we reach the right common ground.
Sounds like a good democracy. So Nidhi, I'd like to bring you in over here. The whole evolving nature of this pandemic, what does planning for such a situation actually entail? And what are the various aspects the committee has actually taken into consideration?
Thanks, Manisha, for your question. Thanks for having me here. So when it all started in Jan-Feb, most of us thought that worst case, it will be like SARS, what we saw in 2003, something that probably won't affect us Indians with our strong immunity and our warm climate, etc. It's only later now we are realizing that what we are going through is historical. It's once in a century event, something like the Spanish flu. So when the committee started working, we didn't have a clear roadmap or a set template, and there was no proven approach, that this is what you need to do to plan for the safety of residents. So as we went about planning and framing the policies, the endeavor always was to frame responses which were based on the government policies from time to time, the information like Prasad mentioned that was available from reliable sources, and the constant feedback that we got from residents. I remember when we first decided to regulate the internal traffic in the building, and one of the many measures we took was to stop the part-time house help. Now, at that time, we took that step, but we kept wondering if the measures that we were taking were over stringent. Now, in hindsight, I don't think we did anything which was, unnecessary or which was over stringent, so to say. So, like you said, in an evolving situation as such as this pandemic, it was important to be dynamic and adapt our policies. So, we have done that constantly. We have shown flexibility and also restraint wherever required. I remember an instant where one of the residents had a washing machine breakdown. Now we had put restrictions on all entries, but we soon realized that there cannot be a blanket ban on everything, and certain essential things like services like repairman and technician will have to be allowed. So therefore we said, okay, we'll allow this, but subject to address checks to ensure that the person is not coming from a containment zone. Another instance I'll tell you is we have this garden for dogs where the dogs get their daily exercise. So we had closed the dog garden because there were too many maids, too many dogs, kids coming in to play with the dogs. Now, subsequently, we got a lot of repeat requests from all the pet parents saying that their dogs aren't getting sufficient exercise. So we heard them, we said, okay, we open it, but this time 2 dogs at a time, fixed time slots, no maids, has to be accompanied by the pet parents. They ensure that no kids come into play so that, we conform to the social distancing guidelines. So we've constantly taken feedback from residents, adapted our responses. Throughout this lockdown, we have ensured that, in fact, for essentials in other societies, people have to step out at least once or twice a week to procure it. Throughout the lockdown, we have planned so as to ensure that they get their continuous supply of essentials, whether it is, groceries, vegetables. So Reliance and DMart had made available daily groceries and veggies. So we've done bulk deliveries of everything from mangoes to dry fruits. So the whole idea has been to ensure that a resident can get their essentials within the complex without really having to step out. Now the government has started announcing relaxations. There could be a possible spike in cases. So we are now focused on planning for a situation. What if there's a positive case in the building? I hope it doesn't happen. But if it happens, so therefore we have procured an oximeter, pulse oximeter for early detection, and also an oxygenator to stabilize the person till he gets a hospital bed. So I'm happy to say that all the efforts have yielded results and we are completely safe with not a single positive case in the complex. And all this planning and execution would not have yielded results if it wasn't for the support of all the residents, So it's been a superb team effort. Yeah, so that's where we are.
Oh, I can vouch for the fact that it's been very well organized and very well planned. And yeah, I think all the residents have definitely understood, appreciated, and supported, the planning that's actually been done. I have a difficult question for Sandy, actually. So Sandy, we've all heard horror stories of RWAs being high-handed, arbitrary in the decision-making. How do you manage balancing conflicting needs? Now, I know Prasad touched upon it, and very diplomatically, he said it was all like a good democracy, but I'm sure there are stories there. How did you manage the, conflicting needs, points of view, demands of society members, and did it ever get out of hand?
First of all, thanks for having us on the show. And how Nidhi put it, we're proud to say that PG is COVID-free as of now. It's been almost 70 days plus, and it's all thanks to all the COVID committee members, plus the residents, obviously. Now, these are not horror stories, and this is not a tough question. To just answer it very, very simple, that these are facts. These are not horror stories. You hear all these in every single society. So why do you have a committee? The committee is formed by all the members, and few of them are selected. few of them are selected knowingly that they will be horror stories in the future. But then also, not everybody stands for the elections, and only a few of them stand, and we elect them. In our case, in Planet Godrej, I don't think we actually have a say like a election, because there are only 7 members standing for the elections and 7 of them are elected. So yeah. So now coming back to the question, that horror stories plus sorry, what was the second point?
You made me forget the question.
I got excited, so I forgot the question.
No, so balancing conflicting needs, points of view, and demands of society members, and did it ever get out of hand?
Yeah, so it goes out of hand for sure. But what happens is, like our COVID committee, we are almost working 24/7. It's like we get messages at 12 o'clock in the night also, if there is some incoming member or some emergency for a member to go out. The security has been very, very categorically instructed not to allow any person, whether it be any medical emergencies also, the person, they call us, any of the COVID members, and we then allow them after seeing the situation. So how to handle this and how we have been handling it is, we have been harsh on people. It's all just for the benefit of the residents, nothing else. If I'm not allowing somebody to go out, is only for the betterment of the person and at large our society. We have almost like 2000 plus members plus domestic helps staying in PG. Plus we have almost like something around 35-40 staffs staying in PG from day one. We never allowed any staff to travel from their work from their house to our society. We made arrangements for everybody in the society, and we are spending everything on them. Now, harsh, why I'm using that word harsh is only for the reason that everybody thinks that their work is always important. It's human tendency that I am important and my work is the utmost priority. So we have to see which is the priority and what are not the priorities. Like if somebody has to just deposit a check in the bank, we help them. We have our staff, we have the motorcycles, they help them to deposit checks. That's not a really this thing, what do you call the urgent matter. But people take it as an urgent matter. So this becomes harsh for the member, thinking that the members themselves think that we have been harsh on them. But if you see, it's not harsh. And coming back to your point about how to handle all these things and all, almost 95% of the residents have been cooperative, completely cooperative with us. There have been few incidences like smuggling in maids at 2:45 in the night, obviously. So obviously if it is not a allowed thing, so these are things which we get a call at 2:45 also in the night from the security, asking that whether we should allow the person or not. Now, if we have not allowed maids for any resident, it's not right for us to allow one maid for one person. Like yesterday, there was a fire in one of the buildings in Cuff Parade. One of the members' mother and her maid was stuck in the building, and the fire brigade vacated the whole building. So we had to take a harsh decision. We had to take a decision against all our principles for allowing her mother and the maid into our building only for overnight. Early morning, 7 o'clock, she messaged me that they have already exited the building and they've gone back. So, this kind of a decision you have to take. So you have to balance it according to the priorities and according to the urgent need of a person. So yeah, touch wood, till now we have really managed to do it well. We have say out of 378 families staying in PG, we must be having 358 families, happy families, probably 20 families who are not really sad, but unhappy here. So yeah, that's it. That's the way we balanced it. And yeah, again, proud to say we are a COVID-free building here.
Sounds good. That's a good track record to have. And now a question for all four of you. Lockdown guidelines are very clear now. We are in the begin again mode. What do you see moving from here on for the next 12 to 18 months? What will life look like for a resident?
Should we go in the same order? Or?
Any order is fine.
Prasad, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Look, I think it's another critical phase that we are entering, because so far what was happening is, in the initial phase, the government itself was pretty strict about the lockdown. Now we have reached a stage where the government is shifting focus from containment of COVID to opening up of the economy. And obviously, that's a very different stance. And as a result, they will continue to open up. Unfortunately, it is coming at a stage when the cases, especially in Mumbai and Maharashtra, are rising. So had this opening up been happening or happened when the cases were reducing, then I think there would be no issue. But it is happening at the wrong time. So I think we at PG will have to be very, very careful in looking at the measures that we take, so that we don't go overboard. If we open up too fast, then we could end up undoing a lot of the effort in the 70 days of keeping PG COVID free. So, but still there are various voices, and one voice is that look, let us learn to live with it. We need to open up, etc. So there are pushes and pulls, but it seems that what we will do is a more slower opening up than what the government is doing, and hopefully that will serve us well. And we hope that we can continue to keep PG COVID. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, Manisha, if that's fine.
Of course. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I was saying that, there are 2 or 3 very important things to look at going forward. One is, we talked about how we were trying to control the main gate, which is basically the entry and the exits and the re-entries. So that has been sort of relaxed a fair bit, also because a lot of people need to go out for work. That's been allowed by the government, and we need to abide by what the government says. So that's been relaxed. But there are other aspects. So starting from people who had live-in maids or would now want to have live-in maids. So it's basically a one-time transition from outside the gate to inside the gate. But that live-in maid who comes in and either was with them before or wants to come in new, we don't know what situation that live-in maid has been in. And it is risky for somebody to come in for that family as well as for the community in general. So that's one thing that's debatable, but at some point in time, we will have to allow. But if people are used to live-in maids, then it's been a fairly long time that they've been carrying on their own. So at some point in time, that needs to be allowed. How it will be allowed, what kind of quarantining, social distancing, these are things that we need to work on. The other 2 aspects are about part-timers, which are people who come in and go out. So part-time maids and drivers. These are the key requirements of people. They've had maids and drivers. Many of us continue to engage them, pay them, because we believe that's the right thing to do. And we would like them to come back when it's safe enough. But when is it going to be safe enough? What kind of measures do we take? And they're not going to be one time. So then the main gate needs to be monitored very, very closely. There can be asymptomatic cases, which unfortunately you can't do anything about. But if there are symptoms, they need to be caught at the earliest possible time. So again, there's a lot of debate going on that as to when and how we will open up for maids and drivers. And the last category that I see is basically visitors into the society. So they are, what should I say? they're not essential. So they're aspirational, so to say, that, I want my, friend to come in, I want to have a party. So it's a bit distant, but at some point in time, that will also have to be allowed. So we are already thinking about all of these and to see what measures we need to put in place, what kind of deployment we need to do to ensure that the chances of anybody catching the infection are reduced to the minimum. Unfortunately, even now or later, it cannot be brought down to zero, the probability, but we're trying hard to see how we can reduce these probabilities.
So I'll just add to what Pankaj and Prasad said. So I echo their views. Essentially, the elephant in the room is house helps. So I think at last count we had about we think there are about 900 to 1,000 people that we see an influx of when we open the gates to these part-time house helps. So, and most of them, as we know, don't stay in self-contained houses. They probably share the washrooms, etc., with 10-15 families. So we really need to be careful. There's a significant amount of elderly population in the building. So we need to strike a balance. And I think as a PG resident, what you can expect is it will be slightly slower opening than what our neighboring buildings have done. But be rest assured, have faith on the committee. We've taken measures to keep you safe, and we'll continue to do that going forward.
Thank you. We have less than a minute, I think barely about 30 odd seconds. So Sandy, closing comments, please.
Yeah, just what you asked is 15 months to 18 months.
That's right.
I would just say that mask has become the new dressing for you now. So you should have the mask on all the time when you're out of your house at least. So I think that's all.
So put your mask face on is what the COVID committee wants to close with. Thank you so much, guys.
Don't show your smile.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for being on this podcast, and we'll catch up with you.